Heap eventually operate in this very competitive market of product analytics. And I think the big players were like Mixpanel and Amplitude. I don't know if that's right, but yeah,
Yeah,
who did you
that's
usually
right.
sell against? And then like, how were you able to win?
There's a lot of really interesting learnings here too. After Heap, I spent a year in the venture world and worked really closely with some early Amplitude folks and learned about kind of that playbook from the sideline. But super early days, it was basically how do we get in the deals that is in, and then we had a really fundamental differentiator and could win a big chunk of them. Amplitude came on the market really similar timing, and I think Amplitude was really impressive from positioning and product marketing from day one. Like they very much were like, we're going to be the tool for product managers. We're going to beat on that drum nonstop. And then from a positioning standpoint, like Amplitude and came in as like a cheaper, faster version of Mixpanel. And then slowly they've been able to move to kind of the premium product in the market. I think what was interesting about Heap is, again, going back to that differentiator, is that it was just very clear to say, philosophically, do you believe that event tracking should be automatic? If so, you would want to work with Heap. Now, there may be some features we weren't quite there on, but competitively, it was saying, hey, the last 20% of complex analytic features doesn't matter as much of getting this right. And I think the people that have lived through any bit of that pain were willing to get on board with us. There was another player in the space called Pendo, which was getting off at the same time as well. That made things complicated because they were saying, hey, we might not have the most sophisticated analytics, but we're including all of these other things in a suite that product people may care about. And that was really tricky to sell against. And I think what we did is we had some partnership motions that we were probably too late to get to, but that allowed us to compete on that front. But it was definitely a competitive market, all those vendors getting a lot of money, all of us chasing for a pie that probably felt like was smaller than all of the VCs wanted it to be at the time. But I think a lot of really good reps have come out of all of those companies because they're highly competitive deals. In the beginning, there wasn't tons of differentiation. And you just had to, build champions, build business case, figure out how you're going to do this, use references, all of the things that I think have made people good sellers years later.
Yeah, it's super interesting. It sounds like the whole market, okay, realize there's this whole space to build things for the product team and the product analytics, shifting it from engineers. And then there was just a bunch of companies who sort of realized that and started to build in that direction. You touched on it a little bit at the end of your answer, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper. Was there anything like in your approach of how you sold the product, not just like what you sold, that made you different? Not just going through the different features and saying, hey, our features are better X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z, but like in sort of your salesmanship approach and how you went to market. Was there anything that stood out from Heap?
I think there's two things. The first thing, like, again, because we had that philosophical differentiator, you could understand if people are on board and leaning into that or not in the beginning. And if they weren't, we got good at not chasing those deals. I think the second thing is we had a trial and we used that heavily to our advantage, right? Like we talked about how you can get up and running faster, how the chance of implementation is a lot higher. And then we were able to prove that. So like we had some really good technical resources that said, hey, Alex, drop this JS snippet on your app or on your site. We're going to come back, and when we meet in 5 days, we're going to have all pre-built reports. We're going to actually do some analysis on your behalf. So our best conversations, I think there's a lot of similarities to this today at Champify. You really weren't talking about the product. You were talking about, here's what I'm seeing in your app. Here's the types of decisions you can make. And in doing that, they're like, wait, this is already set up. Like we're 90% of the way there. And I think that really started to say like, okay, maybe I don't need some of these other things that some other vendors have. Looking back, like, it was a really big differentiator we had. And I think we leaned into it pretty well.
Yeah, you were just able to like get to value faster, accelerate the
For
time to
sure.
value, and as opposed to doing like, oh, here's your slide deck on theory how it's going to work.
Exactly.
Here's how it's actually
And
going to work. Yeah.
I remember being in these demos and, they weren't demos. They were really like, trial setups or let's go through an analysis. And we had different versions of this over the years. A preferred customer program, we'll go and build this out. And we'd say like, forget the product, forget the analytics tool. What are the 10 things you guys care about right now? Like, what are you thinking about as a business? And, if we got installed properly and let a couple weeks of data get captured, we could come in there and be like, here's what we're seeing for your conversion rate. Here's some differences in what you're seeing on retention. Hey, you're building that feature you just had 3 engineers spend a month on. No one's even using it. You have a discoverability issue. So you started to act as this consultant, which was a good thing on the sales process. On the ramping sales side, like AE side, you really needed smart reps that could think like that, right? And be able to say, like, what do these people care about? How do they make money? How do I guide our technical resources? Or in the beginning, we were doing it on our own. How do you guide yourself or others to be able to build the right analysis that's going to get them to realize, okay, this is the right decision?
And I know while you were at Heap, you kind of grew the average contract size quite significantly. It went from like 5K to over 50K. How were you able to do that? Was it a lot of this like anchoring to the business outcomes? And what were sort of those levers you pulled? Did you just increase prices? Like, how were you able to, kind of move up market there?
I guess three or four things. Like many companies, I don't think we were charging enough in the beginning. So it's easy to be like, oh, the sales was so smart, but it was just like, wait, we could be charging a lot more for this. Like there's a lot more value for this. And I think most founders are uncomfortable raising their prices, and it's something everyone kind of goes through. I think I put some good pressure to be like, listen, I know people will pay more for this. Let's slowly keep testing that and pushing it. I think the second thing was the competition with Becca. Like it just spurred like, hey, you know what? I think I can get more here, and I'm confident it's worth it. We can deliver. I think we were also seeing some more wins from our customers that gave us more confidence. Like, wait, we're working with a big insurance company. They increased their conversion rate by, 0.8%. You know how much money that means for them? Like, hold on, there's something real here. And then we started to add some other products as well. Like at the time, everyone was starting to want their data in a data warehouse, and Amazon Redshift was the hottest thing. And I remember the first time the CEO said, hey, we just built this. I want you to sell it as an add-on. And I said, okay, how much? Like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, go figure it out. And I was like, okay, here we go. So get on a call, push way too high, understand that there's kind of a range people are willing to pay. All three of those things kind of helped us slowly inch it up.
Were there any memorable deal stories like on the enterprise side from this time at Heap, where you're like, oh God, I can't believe we closed that one, or anything that stood out?
Yeah, I remember there was a couple different use cases for the product. There was like this get on a site where people have high value conversion, lending site, insurance companies, et cetera, doing a lot of testing and optimization, right? Constantly looking at that web page experience as a product. There was also an internal use case, an internal tooling use case. So huge companies that might have hundreds of internal productivity apps and had a lot of engineers dedicated to that. I remember we, with a big consulting company, we had, started with like a 2K swipe your credit card deal, eventually got them to like 25K. They wanted to go bigger. And I'll never forget this. We prepped for it. Founders on the other end of on the back of my monitor. And we were going to be like, all right, we're going to quote these people $600,000. And in our head, we're like, well, there's this many engineers here. Here's how much you can sell. And we got laughed at, like purely laughed at, like, whoa, what? Like I was expecting you to say 30,000. How did we get here? Like, this is not happening. I felt dumb, but actually I think there's some good learnings in that. Like, maybe it's having some of the courage to push the envelope and really figure out where that is. I think there's also some learnings of, hey, you better get really clearer on how you're articulating that value. I am proud to say that, one of their biggest competitors actually ended up becoming a 750K deal 3-4 years later. So it was there. I think we were a little early in how we articulated that value, or how other people have personally experienced that value. But I remember having all the confidence in the world going into this, like, all right, we're going to do this, like pumping myself up, and literally getting laughed at. But I actually, looking back, I don't think we were wrong. I think we were just a little early.
I love that story. I mean, in all of us in the early stage, just, criminally underpriced our products. I've done it at Doc, and we're increasing, our prices and different things. So you just don't have the confidence that, in the product in the early days, everything that's wrong with it. But then as you start to mature and it gets good, and you start to see the real impact on the business, and you start to kind of build confidence, and like you do got to increase your prices because you're having a real impact on the business. So I don't know. I give you credit. I don't have the balls to quote a 600K deal yet, but one day, one day.
Yeah, I went in there guns blazing. I'll never forget. It was like crickets. Like the guy was literally laughing at us. But again, I do think some of that is necessary. Maybe we went a little too crazy, but I don't think we're far off.